Hi, welcome to the Itihasa channel. Today we talk about the last part of the training that the Pandavas and the Kauravas got in the ashrama and the Gurukula of Dronacharya. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Swami Sharnamayappo, Om Guruve Namaha, Om Subramanyaya Namaha. After the episode with Ekalavya, which was around 10 years after Dronacharya had started his Gurukula, the relationship between Arjuna and Dronacharya changed. They had a blood pact between them now. The blood was Ekalavya's, of course, but there was a blood pact between Dronacharya and Arjuna. While earlier there was always this case where Dronacharya would try to teach Ashwathama a little more than Arjuna, and Arjuna had to find ways and means of being around Dronacharya all the time. Now Dronacharya sought out Arjuna all the time and was with him all the time, teaching him everything he knew. Ashwathama, on the other hand, Dronacharya's son, would spend more time with the Kaurava princes, especially Duryodhana. Ashwathama knew that eventually it would probably be Duryodhana who would be king, though Yudhishthira was the elder one. But he knew the politics of the castle and politics of the palace, and he knew that Dhritarashtra wouldn't give up so easily, and Bhishma would not fight against Dhritarashtra's decision. And eventually it would be Duryodhana who would be crowned prince. And Ashwathama knew that it would always benefit him to be close to Duryodhana and to be friendly with Duryodhana. Duryodhana, on the other hand, valued the greatness of Ashwathama, for Ashwathama was no mean warrior. He was a great warrior and had shown his greatness during the training process. And Ashwathama had a penchant for learning about the Astras. But Ashwathama's penchant was a little more theoretical than practical. Ashwathama would learn the nuances about the Astras, on how to take the Astras and bring it forth and how to withdraw it. He would learn the stories of the Astras, of their origins and how they were perfected and how they were made by the makers of these Astras. And along with learning how to use them, his ideas and his knowledge about the Astras were highly theoretical. Arjuna was more practical. Arjuna knew the intricate use of the Astras, how to control their power, how to unleash it to their full potential, and how to use it and treat the Astras like they were his friends. And Duryodhana knew that he needed allies on his side, for if he were to challenge the Pandavas to the throne, he knew he would need someone to counter Arjuna, who was without parallel. And Ashwathama, though not as good as Arjuna, would be a worthy foil against Arjuna. And so Duryodhana also ensured that his friendship with Ashwathama grew. And Ashwathama on his side nurtured his friendship with Duryodhana, leaving enough time for Drona to give all his concentration and training to Arjuna. And Dronacharya realized that if he has to make Arjuna one of the greatest archers of all time, he has to give him training mainly in two aspects. One is the Astras, and one is fighting multiple enemies. While Dronacharya had at various points of time taught Arjuna various Astras and taught the others also various Astras, the simpler ones like the Varunastra and some of the Vayu Astra and some of the simpler Astras, now Drona started taking his time out to teach Arjuna the more complex and the more destructive Astras. As we had discussed in an earlier episode, these Astras were sound-activated missiles, sound-activated weapons, and Dronacharya knew the art of infusing the power of the Astra in common everyday objects, like maybe be it grass or be it any other piece of weapon, even the mace. And he taught some of these secrets to Arjuna. It was said that very few people in all of Bharatvarsha, the Bhargava Parshurama, Bhishma, Dronacharya, and now Arjuna, could infuse the power of the Astras into common everyday objects. The Pandavas and the Kauravas in total would spend 12 years in the ashram of Drona. They had come into the ashrama when they were around 16 or 17 years of age. Between 14 and 17 years of age, and 12 years had passed now, 10 years had passed, and two more were about to pass. And over time, when these 12 years would be over, Dronacharya knew that he had to make Arjuna the greatest archer, and he had to make great fighters out of all the princes. And so he took all his time out to teach Arjuna the various astras, the deadly astras that could combat great warriors much greater than yourself. Some of the astras that Dronacharya taught Arjuna were the Agni Astra, the Vayu Astra, the Varuna Astra, the Aind Astra, and some of the various other deadlier astras that could cause a complete annihilation of the place around you, if not used properly, if not controlled properly. And then Dronacharya started to teach Arjuna the art of fighting multiple warriors at a time. So the Mahabharata describes in great detail about how these great archers would fight multiple warriors at a time, and they were classified based on their ability to fight great warriors, the large number of enemies at a time. So these warriors would normally be on the ratha, or the chariot, or the car. So a great archer would be positioned on a chariot along with a worthy charioteer who would take them around across the battlefield. And standing or sitting on this great chariot, these archers would fight against multiple forces and multiple soldiers at a single given time. These archers would usually use the shaft of the chariot as a support. A small seat would be prepared on this shaft on which they would sit. And sitting on this shaft with one leg on the floor of the chariot, these archers would go on shooting arrows against the forces around them, against the soldiers around them, killing them in large numbers. A warrior or such an archer who could fight against 5,000 soldiers around them was called and categorized as a rathi. So a rathi would be an archer who could fight against 5,000 foot soldiers around him, maybe some on horses too. And in multiples of 12 it increased. So an archer who could fight against 60,000 soldiers around him, 5,000 into 12, 60,000 soldiers around him at one given time alone would be considered an atirathi. And somebody who could fight against 12 atirathis or 720,000 soldiers around him single-handedly was considered a Maharathi. And this was the classification. Eventually, over time, Bhishma, Arjuna, and Karna would be the three people in the entire Mahabharata who could fight against two Maharathis at a single point of time. Even Dronacharya could not fight against two Maharathis at a single point of time. All the others were single Maharathis. Bhishma, Arjuna, and Karna were the only three who would be double Maharathis. And so Dronacharya started the training for Arjuna to be at least an Atirathi. And Arjuna had an impeccable sense of balance. It was said that Arjuna would not take the support of the shaft of the chariot. He could stand on a chariot that was rushing through irregular, uneven ground at breakneck speed, turning to the left and the right and moving back and forth across the large battlefield. And Arjuna would stand on his chariot in the mandala posture with his two legs apart, without taking support of the shaft or even having to sit down on a chair. And he could balance himself impeccably, and he would use his bow and arrow to shoot arrow after arrow in the thousands just by swiveling along his hip. And these archers would be so supple that they could swivel left and right to such an extent that they could cover 360 degrees around them. And over time, Arjuna developed the ability to shoot equally efficiently with both his left and his right hand. And for this, he was known as Savyasachi, somebody who could use both his left and his right hand to discharge arrows from his bow. And so Arjuna had trained to stand on a chariot that was being drawn by an expert charioteer, swivel from the left to the right, encompassing all 360 degrees so that every single soldier around him could be in view. And in every swivel, you would not only see the soldier but identify who the greatest threat among them was, and discharge arrows with absolute precision so that every arrow would find its mark. Not an arrow could lose its mark, for if you had to fight against 5,000, 60,000, or even 720,000 soldiers at a time, every arrow had to find its mark. And while you're rushing through this battlefield with your charioteer himself would be shouting advices to you, looking around the battlefield, looking for the place of maximum risk, and relating it to you, telling you where to direct your fire. And so you had to keep your eyes open to look for the greatest threat and which direction the threats were coming from. For the common foot soldiers could be easily quelled, for they might not be a great threat. But at some points, you would have to identify where the greatest threat would come from. And while you are doing this, your charioteer also would be scanning the battlefield to look for threats, guiding the chariots and the chariot and the horses away from those threats, trying to evade those threats and trying to miss the arrows being fired by your enemy. And you had to keep your ears open at all times to find out exactly what your charioteer was saying, and accordingly heed his advice and take action. And over time, over the next 2 years, Drona had trained Arjuna adequately such that he was one of the only Kuru princes who could fight with 60,000 soldiers at one time. And by then, Arjuna had become an Atirathi. And such was the greatness of Arjuna. And so one day, when almost 12 years was up, Dronacharya decided to go with all the Kuru princes, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, to the banks of the Ganga to offer prayers for his Pitras. Also, at every time he would offer these prayers, he would ask for forgiveness for having done what he did to Ekalavya. And so this entire entourage went to the banks of the Ganga. And there the Ganga was as serene as a sea, with the other end of the bank barely visible. Absolutely still, Dronacharya got down into the Ganga. And as he started offering prayers in the Janvi, they noticed a few logs floating around the river. And suddenly, without warning, one of these logs appeared to come to life. For it was a large, giant crocodile of more than 15 feet, a primordial creature which had subsequently lasted from the dinosaur ages. A large, powerful beast, this huge crocodile immediately splashed and caught hold of Dronacharya's thigh in the water. Now, Dronacharya was a very strong fighter and a strong warrior, and was no doubt that he could overpower a crocodile on land. But a crocodile in water is a different beast altogether. And Dronacharya tried his best to get the better of the crocodile. He started bending out to reach to the eyes and the jaws, to pierce the eyes, to disable the crocodile and to pry its jaws apart. And everyone on the shore stood frozen. Absolute fear and confusion. They couldn't move. And there was absolute silence, except for a blur of movement. From the moment that initial splash generated, Arjuna had started to move. The weapons were kept a distance away, for when the Guru offers prayers at the water, you do not hold your weapons with you. And so the weapons were all kept away in one corner. And in a blur, Arjuna was on his feet, pushing through Bhima and Duryodhana, who stood in his way. He ran to the area where the weapons were kept, grabbing a bow and an arrow and a clutch of arrows. Within moments, he had sent in 5 arrows to the crocodile. One hit the eye, one shattered the jaw, and the remaining 3 found its mark in the belly of the crocodile as the crocodile was rolling over, taking Drona in its mouth. In that moment that Arjuna had discharged the arrows, the Ganga had dark blood flowing into it. Not his guru's blood, thankfully, it was the blood of the crocodile, and it's in the moment that crocodile lay dead, releasing Dronacharya from its grasp. Visibly shaken and scared, Dronacharya started to swim to the shore, and the Kuru princes then helped him into the shore. Dronacharya limping, blood flowing down from his thigh where the sharp teeth of the crocodile had pierced through, and the jaw had snapped tight onto the thigh. And Dronacharya looked up at Arjuna in absolute gratitude. Dronacharya knew that eventually he would be able to force himself away from the crocodile and kill the crocodile, but not before the crocodile had inflicted irreversible damage to his thigh and his leg. For the grasp of the crocodile was getting tighter and tighter, and the crocodile started rolling in the river, taking Dronacharya under it. And as much as Dronacharya had fought, he knew it was a losing battle and he would come out of it with a disability. And this brought enough overwhelming amount of gratitude to Arjuna for what he had done. For nobody else among those princes had even moved. And in that second in which that crocodile had grasped his leg, Arjuna had discharged 5 arrows in clinical precision, like a surgeon who would react to blood pouring out of a patient with absolute calm and not even breaking a sweat. And he limped to Arjuna, held him tight, hugged him tight, and smelt his hair. The Mahabharata often describes a warm, tender hug by a father or a friend or a guru as the person giving him a tight hug and smelling his hair. And this was the type of hug that Dronacharya gave Arjuna. And he looked at Arjuna and said, "Today I want to make you the greatest warrior in all the land." And he made Arjuna have a bath in the river and come back up. He made all the Kuru princes, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, sit in a huge circle around them, asked Arjuna to face east and sat down next to Arjuna. And then Dronacharya started muttering a mantra which made absolutely no sense, for the language was of a time when the universe was born, millions of years ago. And with this language of words which made absolutely no sense, Dronacharya started muttering a mantra under his breath. And as he muttered this mantra, a strange light seemed to emanate from Dronacharya. He then kept his hands out and kept his palms facing upwards, and a streak of lightning emanated from his chest onto his hand, and a very strange astra materialized in the hands of Dronacharya. It was an astra never seen before by anybody. It shone golden and bright with a strange glaze. The shaft of the astra was not like the shaft of an arrow, but a rounded shaft like that of the body of a fish. The head of the astra consisted of 4 heads pointing in the 4 different directions, Chaturadik. The heads of the astra pointing in the 4 different directions seemed to have a life of their own. The body of the astra seemed to be rhythmically moving like it was breathing, and the head seemed to be quivering and the lips seemed to be moving. It was the Brahmashira, or the Brahmashira, the head of Brahma, the creator. It was the astra created by the creator himself at the time of creation of the universe. And As the mantra lay quivering on Dronacharya's extended hands, Dronacharya muttered another few words, and the astra seemed to rise and hang in air. He then turned to Arjuna. Putting his hand to his lips, he whispered into Arjuna's ear, and Arjuna kept his hands to his ears and listened to this mantra from Dronacharya. This ancient mantra and a language from the time before the universe began. And as Arjuna listened to the mantra, Dronacharya signaled to Arjuna to repeat it. And Arjuna repeated the mantra. And as Arjuna started repeating the mantra, he too held his hands forward with the palms facing up. And that astra which was hanging in the middle of the air suddenly came into the hand of Arjuna. And Arjuna seemed to be lit with that same strange light that enveloped Dronacharya. And then Dronacharya whispered to Arjuna the mantra to retract the astra. And as Arjuna recited that mantra, that same streak of lightning emanated from Arjuna's chest, and the astra seemed to dissolve into the body of Arjuna. And this is how Dronacharya gave the Brahmashira Astra or the Brahmashira Astra to Arjuna. He then looked at Arjuna and told him, there are some rules you need to follow for the use of this astra. This is no ordinary astra. It is one of the few astras in the world which bears no equal. This astra can destroy the entire Bhuloka if used wrongly. It can cause annihilation of the entire land, of the entire earth. It can crack the earth to its core. Use this carefully, O Arjuna. Do not use it against a mortal enemy. Do not use it against a human being. For this astra should only be used against one much more powerful than you, like a deva or an asura, of immense proportions and immense capacity. And you should use this astra only after you've exhausted all the other astras and they have proved to be ineffectual or useless against your adversary. I am teaching you the way of bringing out the astra and to retract it. Ensure that you use it only where it should be used, never for demonstration, never for against an ordinary foe. And so saying, he blessed Arjuna, put his hand on his head and blessed him and said, today you are beyond compare. Very few archers and very few warriors in all of Bharatvarsha know the existence of this astra. And today I have handed it over to you. And this was how Dronacharya became the greatest teacher, selflessly keeping everything above himself in the teaching of Arjuna. Almost selflessly, because for he knew that in Arjuna would be the man who would bring back the king Drupada as a prisoner, who would conquer Panchala for Dronacharya. Dronacharya knew that Arjuna was the warrior who would eventually bring fame and he would bring dharma to the land. And in this way, Dronacharya ensured that Arjuna would be the greatest archer of all the land, the greatest warrior of all the land. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Swamiye Sharanamayapo, Om Guruve Namaha.